Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are in the world. It's so good to connect with you. It feels so good to be in this space, sharing this space together. So, welcome. I hope you're doing well. If you're in the US, I hope you had a peaceful and connected Thanksgiving. And wherever you are in the world, as we approach this holiday season, I hope that you're taking really good care of yourself, that you're really checking in with yourself and seeing what you need. Do you need connection? Do you need alone time? Do you need to kind of do some active things, or do you need some time to just relax? Really check in with yourself periodically to make sure that you're taking care of what you need. So today, I am going to talk a little bit about self-compassion. And I will have a Q&A, and you can ask questions about anything they have questions about. But I want to talk a little bit about self-compassion because it is something that is so important for all of us. No matter what your history is, we all struggle with beating ourselves up on occasion. Self-doubt, feelings of guilt, failure, so many things that we can find ourselves thinking about that leave us feeling not so great. And that really is true for everybody. It's something that we all have in common to some degree or another. For some, it's pretty unrelenting and very impactful. So self-compassion is something in my work with clients and in the groups that I've done. Self-compassion is something that is talked about regularly, whether it is specifically defined as practicing self-compassion, or we're talking about letting go of responsibility for things that aren't theirs, healing shame that isn't theirs, feeling like they failed at something, able to work through that. So a lot of different things related to emotional well-being. If you are able to practice self-compassion, it helps to alleviate, really to heal, depending on what the circumstances, whatever it is that is creating that. And so self-compassion really is important. And in the book, I talk about self-compassion being the antidote, really, to any self-doubt, self-judgment, criticism, shame, guilt that we might hold on to. No matter what it is that's going on, even if we screw up, even if we actually do something that really isn't great, you still need to take responsibility for that. But if you can experience self-compassion in that moment, or in those moments following, then you can accept responsibility from a truly authentic place without feeling really guilty or ashamed about it. And that is kind of the epitome of emotional health, is being able to take responsibility for something that we actually have responsibility for, not for all the things that you hold responsibility for that you truly don't have responsibility for. But when we make a mistake, if our actions hurt somebody, intentional or not, but being able to accept responsibility for that and not feel a ton of guilt around it, certainly not feel shame around it, because it's that leads to the ongoing difficulty. And if we can practice self-compassion, then instead of feeling guilt or shame, we're able to feel more connected to ourselves and to that person that we're able to say, I'm sorry to. Because a genuine I'm sorry that comes from a place of not feeling shame and guilt deepens the connection for both of you. Within ourselves, self-compassion is really important because how often we tend to criticize ourselves. It might be something relatively small, like, oh, this meal I made doesn't taste very good. Or it could be something really significant. But either way, when we practice self-compassion, it alleviates whatever it is that we're left with feeling when we're beating ourselves up. So self-compassion really is very important. And for most of us, self-compassion does not come naturally, nor is it easy to practice. It may be very easy to experience compassion for other people. Right? Think about that for a moment. Think about the compassion that you have for others. If they're feeling badly about something, if they're struggling with something, think about the compassion that you can feel for other people. Yet most of us have an incredibly difficult time turning that compassion inward and feeling that same level of compassion towards ourselves. And there are different reasons for that. But that is the reality. And if we have difficulty practicing self-compassion, or if we don't really know what that is, then all that doubt that we're left with, all that criticism that we're left with, continues to reinforce the beliefs that we hold on to about who we are. So, what is self-compassion? My idea of self-compassion is simply an ability to practice or to have a moment of kindness, acceptance, understanding for ourselves. It really is that simple in theory, not simple in practice. Because in your mind, in our minds, when we try to have a moment of understanding or kindness when we feel like we failed or we feel like we screwed up, if we try to have some thoughts that are understanding, we almost always come up with a counter argument, a rebuttal to what it is that we're saying to ourselves, because that's what our pattern is. We live inside of our heads, whether we're conscious of that or not, and these thoughts just repeat over and over again. So the practice of self-compassion is not easy, but the theory of self-compassion and the impact that it has, in theory, is simple. So I created Deeply Rooted. It's a guided journal that has practices, prompts, meditations to help you kind of go through different types of experiences to really work on creating a sense of self-compassion around whatever those experiences might be. So for anybody who's followed me for a while, or certainly if you've taken one of my courses, you know that I often give journal prompts and little practices to help you kind of connect within and work through different things through a journal prompt. And so this book, Deeply Rooted, is that, but a bit bigger, a bit deeper, I suppose. But there are different types of practices for you to be able to work through, to connect with and journal, because journaling itself, the act of writing, is a practice that helps you express, release, and heal. So it is a journal, so there are pages with lines to be able to journal. And I've also left you in the book enough journaling space to come back to the prompts over and over again, to redo, because in a given moment, when you read a prompt, where your mind goes might be very different than where it might have gone the day before. There are a lot of factors that play into that. Or it might go back to the same thing, but maybe you feel a little bit different. What comes to mind might be a bit different. And each time that you're able to sit with that and journal through it, it helps you go a bit deeper to experience more healing and self-compassion. So, that's why I created Deeply Rooted. And it is officially being published on next Tuesday, December 8th. It is available for pre-order now on different resellers, book resellers, internationally as well. I don't know what kinds of stores internationally is available, but there are many different ones, I think, that are the most common internationally, particularly in Europe and Canada. So including Amazon internationally. It is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble here, in addition to some other retailers. If you want a signed copy, you are able to request that on my website, and I included a link in the description of this video where you can follow, and there's links to Amazon and Barnes & Noble there too. But if you'd like to request a signed copy, there's a page on my website that link takes you to for the information and a form to fill out to send to me. So what does self-compassion look like? Well, it depends on what's happening in any given moment. Self-compassion can look like just honoring how you're feeling in a given moment. Being able to say, I'm feeling really sad right now, or I'm feeling really uncertain or scared, and that's okay. It's okay that I feel this. It doesn't make me weak. Or simply, it's okay that I feel this. For a lot of people, when they're feeling something that maybe doesn't feel so good, what will often happen is, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. There's so much to be grateful for. I shouldn't feel bad. So many other people have it worse. I shouldn't feel bad. It's weak to feel that way. I shouldn't feel that way. What would people think if they knew that I felt that way? That is criticism, self-judgment, beating yourself up. That is not helpful, nor is it healthy. Self-compassion allows you to feel what you feel, which is really important for emotional well-being. And it supports you in that feeling. When we can support ourselves with whatever we're struggling with, the need for external support doesn't feel quite so affirming or threatening. I know for a lot of you, you can relate to the idea of reaching support feels really scary. The self-protective mechanisms can go up or kick in, and you want to withdraw, and you end up feeling even worse. We can be with ourselves in those moments, say, it's okay. Okay, that I'm not alone in this. Then we can still reach out for support, which is important, but we feel that we don't feel that energy that feels so icky, that feels so scary, that feels so vulnerable in reaching out. If we can support ourselves in that moment, then we feel like we matter. We feel like whatever we're struggling with is okay. And from that place, when we reach out or when we connect with somebody, we feel a stronger foundation within ourselves so that we don't feel near as vulnerable in that. So that's one example of what self-compassion can look like. I mentioned at the beginning, like if we do something that maybe doesn't feel so good to somebody else, or really being able to accept responsibility for feeling guilt or shame is certainly a way that self-compassion can. Feeling like if you've wanted to do something but you haven't yet done it, or you tried it but it didn't work out quite the way that you wanted, instead of beating yourself up, telling yourself you're such a failure and you knew you couldn't do it, I don't know why you bothered trying, who do you think you are? Of course you're never going to succeed at that, right? Those are the kinds of we often say to ourselves when we feel like we failed. Again, not helpful, not healthy, normal. But self-compassion might be, depending on what the circumstances, but self-compassion might be, at least you tried. Good for you. Feel proud. Maybe next time you'll do better. It's okay that it didn't work out this time. Look at Michael Jordan. I don't remember how many times he didn't make his basketball team, but he didn't make his college basketball team, I think. Maybe it was high school, but it's really just about being kind to yourself. Considering the kinds of things that you would say to somebody that you care about, who might be feeling exactly what you're feeling in that moment. If a friend tried something new that they've been wanting to do and it didn't work out quite the way that they wanted it to, would you tell them, what were you thinking? I don't think you ever should have tried that to begin with. You knew you could never do that. Why would you even bother? Well, I certainly hope not. And I don't think that you would. Yet, those are the kinds of things that we say to ourselves all the time. So self-compassion, really building, cultivating that practice of self-compassion, helps you be gentle with yourself in the way that you would with somebody else. It's a way to express kindness and grace and understanding to yourself in the same way that you would to somebody else. And deeply rooted is a practice that you keep coming back to time and time again to really help not only learn what it is to practice self-compassion, but really get in a habit of practicing self-compassion, because the more you practice it, the more integrated it becomes. The more integrated it becomes, the more natural it becomes. And one of the things that is present for people who can kind of bounce back relatively quickly, who feel a certain level of confidence no matter what is going on, is a regular practice of self-compassion. It is the thing that helped me, well, there were multiple things that helped me heal, but it was an ongoing practice of self-compassion and understanding that really helped me heal and continues to help me when I find that I'm struggling with something. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of check through here. I'm going to share Deeply Rooted with you in just a moment. But I want to just kind of check in. Okay. So I see some questions here, and I will come back in and answer some of those. So hold tight. But I do want to share with you Deeply Rooted. So, it's interesting that I share things publicly all the time and I do these videos, but writing this book, well, not writing the book so much, but publishing the book, making it available for distribution, is certainly one of the most vulnerable things I've done in quite some time in terms of feeling vulnerable, which I found really interesting because most people find doing video more challenging than writing. I tend to be a little bit more the opposite. And so actually creating this book and thinking about it being out there is a little vulnerable. But here is Deeply Rooted. This is the paperback version, and this is the hardback version. So there are both. Whatever your preference is. I actually wanted the hardback version originally because I thought since it's something designed to come back to time and time again, that it would hold up better. The hardback version would hold up better. And I think that's probably still going to be the case. But when I got the paperback copy, the soft copy, I have to say that I really kind of like it. And it actually seems like it might hold up fairly well. So whatever your preference is, there's one available. And I have been asked about creating an audio version of Deeply Rooted, and I will be doing that. I'm not quite sure if I'm just going to read the written version. As I read it out loud, there were some things that seemed a little off to me in terms of speaking it. So I may need to do some adjusting. So it's going to take me a little while to get it out there. And I don't know if it's going to be officially available on wherever you might buy an audiobook, or if it might be something that I just put on my website. I haven't looked into it deeply enough to know all the ins and outs of publishing an audiobook, like on Audible or wherever else you might buy audiobooks. So, Deeply Rooted. There are lots of journal pages and some things I hope it's not getting blurry, but information and prompts and practices and lots of pages for journaling throughout the book as well. So I hope that if you choose to buy it, that it feels like it's helpful and supportive for your journey. And it is something that you find that you come back to time and time again. If you have any questions, obviously you can leave them here. You can also leave them in the comments afterwards. Again, if you want a signed copy, you can find that through the link that I have in the description. Otherwise, you can find it on different retailers. And it is available for pre-order now. And then it will be officially available for distribution next Tuesday on the 8th. Okay, so how can I have more faith in and compassion toward myself as a CSA trauma survivor when I feel like I'm not good enough or don't deserve love? How can I have more faith in and compassion towards myself? Here. Honestly, that is exactly what the book is for. But building that sense of self-compassion is being really intentional and aware when you are being harmful to yourself, so that you can be very deliberate in practicing self-compassion. And even if you don't really feel it. It's like if you're feeling something and you're beating yourself up about feeling it and you say, it's okay that I feel this way. It's okay that I'm feeling sad. Even if there's a part of you that immediately then says, it's not okay, you're being weak. Just keep repeating, it's okay that I'm feeling sad. I wouldn't judge somebody else for feeling sad. Feeling sad is a normal human emotion. It really is about that. The reason that I wanted to do this book is because when we are left to our own devices in our own mind, it's really, really difficult to be in that place where we're beating ourselves up and suddenly think, oh, I need to practice self-compassion. Let me do that. Because when you're in that place where you're really struggling, it's that loop playing over and over again. And sometimes it's a spiral that takes you even deeper. And when you're in that moment, it's not natural. In fact, depending on how much you're struggling, it's kind of impossible to suddenly think, oh, let me practice self-compassion. It unfortunately just doesn't work that way. So having a very intentional, ongoing practice helps you build kind of that muscle, that self-compassion muscle. It helps you build it, it helps you strengthen it over time. And that's, again, why with this book, I really created it with the intention for people to come back and do the prompts over and over and over again. It is not meant to work through and suddenly you're going to have a beautiful practice of self-compassion. I wish that that were possible. I truly do wish that that were possible, but it's not for anybody. It just isn't, because it's not something that we're used to. We have to really work at building that habit. We have to work at integrating that practice. So how do you do it? You practice it. You very mindfully and intentionally practice it in something like a guided journal. And this is true for any kind of thing that you might be trying to build a habit of, like gratitude. With having a guided journal, you can choose maybe daily or a few times a week or whatever it might be. Okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes and sit down and do this. So whether you're feeling bad or not, no matter what's kind of going on, but you've decided you're going to sit down for 5 minutes and work on this journal or work on a journal prompt, even just one. I'm going to spend 5 minutes. No matter what else is going on with you, spending that 5 minutes at that particular time can certainly help you in that moment, but it also is going to help you strengthen that muscle going forward. So the next time that you come back, you're more receptive to the practice. And a guided journal gives you something very specific that you can kind of focus on. So no matter where your mind is, when you sit down to do the journal, it gives you something very specific to think about, to feel, well, not to feel, but to think about, which is going to bring up feeling that you can work through the journaling part. So I hope that that makes sense. It doesn't have to be this book, but it is a practice that you have to keep coming back to time and time again. So I hope that that makes sense. And how can I not feel shame or weakness when calling people I care about when I'm having a breakdown? So again, self-compassion can help with that. Also, specifically with that, think about how, like, do you feel okay if somebody calls you if they're struggling? If somebody reaches out to you for support, does that feel okay to you? And if it does, then that opens the possibility, even just a possibility, that they may also be perfectly receptive to you reaching out to them. The shame that you feel isn't because you're reaching out specifically. The shame that you feel is because You believe that you shouldn't need it. You believe that you're unworthy of it. You believe that maybe it's weakness, that you're struggling. So I'm not necessarily saying all of those things are present, but oftentimes all those things are present, but likely one of those things is present. So again, self-compassion can help with that. Truly, self-compassion has the ability to help with almost anything that we struggle with time and time again. In fact, I'm going to read you just a little something that I have on the back cover of Deeply Rooted. Actually, I'm going to read a little bit of it, so bear with me for a moment. When your heart is centered in self-compassion, you become rooted in self-acceptance. Think about that for a moment. When your heart is centered in self-compassion, you become rooted in self-acceptance. When we are rooted in self-acceptance, we don't feel shame. We don't feel bad about struggling. We don't feel bad about reaching out because we know that we are okay just as we are. And that's what a practice of self-compassion does. I even address a little bit of that specifically in this book. Imagine for a moment the spaciousness that comes from an open heart and emotional freedom to live each day without fear of your imperfections or mistakes defining who you are. Take a moment. Imagine the spaciousness, the openness that comes from an open heart and emotional freedom, that lightness to live each day without fear of your imperfections or mistakes defining who you are, or believing that they define who you are. This is the power of self-compassion. This is the journey of Deeply Rooted. A mindful moment of self-compassion has the ability to shift self-doubt into embodied confidence, shame or guilt into grounded self-acceptance, and fear into eager anticipation. This is what self-compassion has the power to do. And I hope that Deeply Rooted is a tool that can really help you cultivate that deep sense of self-compassion. I was just thinking the last 2 days I wanted or needed to reinfuse myself with self-compassion again. I feel like if we have more for ourselves, the more we have towards others too, just as a byproduct. I think that's really true as well, Amanda. And the thing about it is we can often have a sense of compassion for other people and not necessarily feel like we have much for ourselves. But there's always an energy with that self-compassion that we can express towards others, whether it's in our mind or we actually express it outwardly. Because if we know that we do not feel that same level of compassion, and if we don't feel it for ourselves, we likely don't feel it when somebody expresses compassion towards us either. We often can't actually take that in. So when we feel compassion for another person, it can be a genuine feeling of compassion, but there's a bit of a kind of energetic thing that keeps it from being fully open, kind of like what I just read from the book. It keeps us from being able to have a clear energetic exchange in that. So absolutely. Thank you for helping us feel it's okay to need self-compassion. It is absolutely necessary for us to have self-compassion. Yeah, I talked a little bit about what self-compassion is. I also in the book have a little statement about what self-compassion is not. It is not, I don't remember exactly what I wrote in the book, honestly. It is not selfish. It is not self-indulgent. Um, and it is not kind of self-pity. Like a lot of people feel like, well, if I'm being nice to myself, if I'm saying it's okay that I feel all of this, then I'm just having a pity party. No, absolutely not. In fact, it's far from that. Far from that. Some days it's really hard and some days it's easier. I try to take each day as it comes. Absolutely, Michelle. And there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of different reasons why that would be the case. And again, just like anything, and I talk about this in, under different kinds of, or for different reasons, around different things, but having a regular practice over and over again is, for whatever it is we're trying to create for ourselves, we need a regular practice of it in order to really strengthen that muscle and fully integrate whatever it is that we are trying to achieve. And like with self-compassion, what happens over time and a lot of practice, and I've been on this journey a very long time at this point. But at this point in my life, self-compassion really is something that happens pretty naturally. Just like years ago, self-criticism, self-judgment, and shame came very naturally. It was automatic. Didn't have to consciously think about it at all. It was just always there. Now, with all the healing that I've been able to do, when I am struggling with something, whatever that may be, because self-compassion is such an integrated part of my daily life, really, don't have to consciously think about it, that when I'm struggling with something or I feel like I kind of messed something up, I'm able to view it from a place of understanding, grace, kindness. I'm sure if you read Deeply Rooted, you will find an error. And not that my stuff is not filled with errors. My videos, you know that I say the wrong things, I use the wrong words, or I can't find my words. When I write, there are typos. Nothing that I create is perfect because nothing is perfect. But one of the things in writing this book, it was a challenge that I did for myself. One of the things in writing this book is that it was just supposed to be done. That I had to let go of the idea of it being perfect. Otherwise, it wouldn't get done. And so I really tried to take that on and say, okay, it's done. It doesn't need to be perfect. And so in thinking, that is one of the things that when I mentioned earlier that this feels really vulnerable, that is part of that, because I know that it isn't as perfect as I would want it to be. After I finished the initial writing of it, I thought, oh, I should have put this in there. Oh, I forgot to do this or whatever. But the difference is, instead of letting that eat at me and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should not publish it. I need to fix it before I can do that. Instead, being able to say, you know what? Nothing is perfect. And I talk about that in the book as well. And nothing has to be perfect in order for it to be beneficial. None of us have to be perfect in order to be able to support other people. None of us have to be perfect, thankfully, because perfection doesn't exist, but none of us have to be perfect to be valuable, to be worthy of support and acceptance. We don't. And the more that we can connect with that compassion, that self-compassion, the more, again, rooted we are in that self-acceptance. And so because of my practice of self-compassion over the years, I can put this book out there knowing that there are going to be people who probably don't like it, that it isn't perfect, that there probably is going to be a typo somewhere. And while that doesn't feel great, it feels okay. And I didn't have to sit down and make a huge effort. It came pretty naturally because of the practice that I've built over the years. So it really is about cultivating, right? Cultivating is something that takes some time. It takes some effort. It takes some energy. And the more that you practice it, the more benefit there is. Oh, back. Can you explain again what self-compassion could look like in a situation where you genuinely feel that you have failed? For example, struggling or not keeping up with a work schedule. So in this particular example, I think being able to, first of all, if there's a reason that you're not keeping up, like if you know that there's some specific thing going on in your life that's causing or creating difficulty in keeping up, being able to honor that, being able to say there's a lot going on right now, and struggling to keep up is something that a lot of people would be having given those circumstances. The other thing is being able to just be kind of kind to yourself in that. Mostly just when you notice beating yourself up about it, telling yourself that you failed, telling yourself that you suck or whatever it is, being able to say that that's not true. There, maybe even point to evidence in other areas of your life that show that you haven't failed, that you're not a failure as a human being, that you don't suck as a human being. And that even, let's say, for example, something at work is supposed to get done and it doesn't get done. End of story. Okay, that's not great. But does that mean that you're unworthy? Does that mean that you deserve to lose your job? Does that mean that you deserve to remove yourself from society and never leave your house again? Of course not. It doesn't mean any of those things. So being able to just really kind of talk yourself through that. And again, what would you say to somebody that you care about who is struggling with the same thing? That's really one of the most simple things that you can do to connect with what you might say to yourself in a self-compassionate way. What would you say to somebody else? And then say that to yourself. Self-compassion is so hard for me as well. I can recognize what I'm feeling and why and be like, yep, makes sense, but I still really struggle with it being okay, that others know about it. Yeah, this is something that, and there's a lot of pieces that go into why this is such a struggle. Self-acceptance is a part of that. Feeling worthy and valuable as you are in the struggle is also part of that. And again, self-compassion is one of the most helpful and important practices in getting there. Like, it's easier the more you do it. You will see your inner voice change even if slowly the more you practice. Absolutely. And still sometimes you'll get caught up beating yourself up. Cumulatively, it adds up. It absolutely does. And you will struggle at times again. And your automatic kind of default is to go back to the kinds of things that you've always said to yourself. And again, that's why it is a practice, why you have to keep coming back to it. Kind of no matter what is going on, you need to practice it when you're struggling. You also need to practice it when you're not struggling, specifically around something, but just making it a regular habit over time. It creeps up behind you. It's only when I feel bad or even I'll realize I've been beating myself up again. Yes, Michelle, that is so true. And how we can end up in such a bad place because it's such an automatic thing that happens that we're not consciously really aware that it's happening. We might just notice that we're feeling really bad, or whatever that feeling ends up creating for ourselves. That's what we tend to notice. And again, that's why a regular practice is so important, because when you have an intentional, or when you make it a practice that is intentional, so you sit down to very intentionally work on something, like working on cultivating self-compassion, then no matter what is going on around you or within you, when you do that on a regular basis, you are shifting what is in your conscious awareness. So over time, in those moments that you don't really notice that it's happening, because you've been working on strengthening that self-compassion muscle, that over time becomes something that is more easily brought into your consciousness, which is how this works. Hello, Neve. So nice to see you here. It's been a while. Intellectualizing is a coping habit. Absolutely. I think the book will help a lot with feeling the intention for taking care of ourselves. That is my hope. I do hope that that is the case. And that as you continue to practice it, you connect more, not necessarily each time, because it takes time, like you have to do it over time, but that as you continue to come back over time and practice self-compassion in general over time, that it really does become much more natural, and eventually your default state of being isn't weighed so heavily over here in the self-doubt. Your natural state of being, as time goes on, first is kind of in this maybe more neutral space, or at least not quite so heavily weighed over here. And then over time, it becomes more weight on that side of self-compassion. It's hard to imagine feeling the lightness you talk about and not feeling defined by my mistakes. I'm not sure if I'm capable of it. I've ordered your book and I'll try. Kelly, you are capable. Every one of you is capable. And I know that I may not know many of you who are listening to this or who will watch this eventually. I know that you are capable because I know that we are all capable. And I know that because what keeps us stuck, what continues to create that struggle, is not truth. It is not because of who you are. It absolutely never has been about who you are. It is about what you believe about who you are, because you believe that your mistakes define who you are. And you believe that everything that isn't perfect is a mistake, and it is not. So, because this is not based in any truth whatsoever, it's all lies that you told yourself, and maybe even that other people have told you, that with the practice, with support, it does shift over time. Now, it doesn't just naturally happen because you think about it every now and then. It does take a concerted effort. It takes mindful energy. It takes consistent practice, which is hard. That is not an easy thing, which is why we kind of keep trying to come back to it, which is why in part I created the journal, to give you something to come back to maybe even every single day and practice one of the prompts every single day. Just keep practicing over and over again. But the more you practice it, the more you start to see and feel in your body. Feel that this is truth, not this. This has never been your truth. Never. And this truth exists, whether you see it, whether you feel it, whether you connect to it or not. This truth already exists. You don't have to do anything for this truth to be available to you. It's there. It's waiting. It's just a matter. And when I say just, I don't mean it's easy. I don't mean it's quick. Again, simple in theory. It is just waiting for you to be able to hold it, to feel it, to integrate it into your being, to feel deeply rooted into that truth. It is there. It is waiting. It has always been there. I'm going to get emotional. Hi, Jack. It's great to have you here. I have worries that there may have been some sort of abuse sexually to me, but no strong evidence for closure. If it feels like it makes sense, can that ever be enough? Yes, it can be. Not having clear memories or any memories is something that a lot of people struggle with, and that can create a whole additional layer of healing that needs to happen. But absolutely, what I think is really important, though, to keep in mind about that is that you can't do the healing that you need to do on your own. None of us can. None of us can. I couldn't do it on my own. I have been on the other side of healing for quite some time. Doesn't mean that my life is perfect, because that never happens. But, well, at this point, I guess it's been about 7 years ago, I went back to therapy. And I had been to therapy years before that, and again, kind of done all the healing that I thought I needed to do. But I was in a situation that was bringing up some stuff. And so I went back to therapy. So even though I have been a therapist, or I had been a therapist at that point for 13 years or so, I had been in private practice. I had been working with survivors of abuse for so long. 7 years ago, I still needed somebody that could see the things that I wasn't able to see because I was in the middle of it. None of us can heal on our own. I don't care who you are. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with strength. It has nothing to do with determination. We need somebody to help us, somebody who really understands, who can be there to support us in this journey. But yes, you can heal without having any specific memories. How do you tell the difference between warranted self-compassion and saying nice things to yourself just to not take responsibility and let yourself off the hook for your failures? Well, okay. So I'm kind of laughing a little bit here because how you end this question, Isabel, is kind of an answer in a sense, or kind of a bit of a response to the question, I suppose. So to not take responsibility or let yourself off the hook for your failures. Well, there's really very little in life that is true failure. Like, There are a lot of things that we might try and they don't turn out the way that we hoped, or they're not enough to win first place. But does that really make you a failure? Absolutely not. There is a difference between not getting first place and being a failure. Very different things. We are all going to have experiences that don't meet the expectations that we have for ourselves, or maybe meet somebody else's expectation. We all have times that we really want to achieve something, and maybe we don't reach it. That's being human. That's not really failing, it's being human. Nobody can achieve absolutely everything in the way that they want to achieve it. Some people are really good at some things and not so good at other things. But not doing the thing that you feel like you want to do, or you think that you should do. Should is always, there's always some judgment there. And if you think you should do something that you haven't done, you're automatically going to feel like you failed. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that how you define failure, that maybe your definition of failing isn't necessarily a very reasonable description of what it means. Think about somebody that you care about, or think about a child. Would you consider them a failure in the same type of circumstance? If they don't meet whatever criteria you've set out, or they've set out for themselves, would you consider them a failure if they don't meet that? So the idea of warranted self-compassion and saying nice things to yourself, or versus saying nice things to yourself to not take responsibility. So part of a healthy practice of self-compassion is actually being able to take responsibility. So like, for example, you sleep through your alarm and you're 2 hours late for work. You need to take responsibility for that, right? You could say, I suppose, did you fail at getting to work on time? I guess you failed to get to work on time. Okay, I said it. But does that make you a failure as a human being? Absolutely not. So you're 2 hours late for work because you slept through your alarm. Well, you have to take responsibility for that. Now, the problem is, for a lot of people, if they do that, they may just take the whole day off because they feel ashamed and they're terrified to show up to work because what are people going to think and all of that kind of stuff. So being able to take responsibility and say, oh my God, I slept through my alarm. Okay, well, I'll have to make sure I set 2 alarms next time, or maybe go to bed a little earlier, or not have that glass of wine before I go to bed, or whatever it might be. So take responsibility for it without feeling ashamed about it. Because as soon as you feel ashamed about it, you can't take responsibility in a healthy way. But if you can take responsibility for that, okay, I really screwed that up. I need to make sure that I work, or that I try harder, or that I set the extra alarm, or whatever it might be. Okay, I really screwed that up, without feeling shame. So I screwed that up. I hope that doesn't happen again. But I'm human. I'm not the only person who's ever slept through an alarm. I'm not the only person who's been late to work. Would I berate my friend for sleeping through her alarm? My guess is probably not. So if you wouldn't berate your friend for it, if you wouldn't say the same words to your friend that you're saying to yourself, then you shouldn't be saying them to yourself either. And one of the things about self-compassion is, and again, I talk about this in the book, it's being able to, a healthy sense of self-compassion is being able to hold both. That's actually part of being a healthy, happy human, is holding both, being able to acknowledge when we screw up without it defining who we are. Because we all screw up. Every single one of us has and will screw up. I certainly do. Sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's bigger things. But it doesn't ever define who we are. We do need to take responsibility. We need to own that. We need to apologize if necessary. We need to put things in place so that it doesn't happen again. And whether that means doing our own healing, setting the extra alarm, whatever it is, we need to take responsibility for that. But we can't let it define who we believe we are as a human. Yes, none of us can do this on our own. Oh, I'm so happy, Jack. That warms my heart. I hope that you're able to get the support that you need. This journey is not easy, but it is so well worth it. The latest lockdown has made me struggle with anxiety and brought up old feelings. Yes. Yeah, that sense of not having control, feeling isolated can bring up all kinds of stuff. And any time that we are a little bit more vulnerable, any of those old beliefs, old coping mechanisms, old ways of feeling, all of that can come back to the surface when we're feeling vulnerable. And there is so much happening in the world right now. And this time of year too adds to it, that all of us are naturally a little bit more vulnerable than we would normally be. So if you're already struggling quite a bit and feeling vulnerable with COVID, with this time of year, your vulnerability is likely at a 90 to 100 out of 100, potentially. So that makes it even more important to really take care of yourself, to give yourself the time and space to honor what you need and how you're feeling. Great. For anybody who does get deeply rooted, I would love for you to somehow share that with me. I don't have a way of knowing how many copies are sold or anything like that through any of those retailers that are out there. So I have no idea. I know that some people have said that they've pre-ordered, but I have no idea what's happening with it. And so I would love to hear from you if you have it in. That could look a lot of different ways. But one of the things I'm going to try to do is have using the hashtag deeply rooted. And so you can maybe comment on a post either here or on my Courageous Journeys page. I do share things on Instagram on occasion, but I'm not very present there. So Facebook, Courageous Journeys is the place where I interact the most. But share hashtag deeply rooted. You could share a post with me. You can send me an email. And I am actually, I don't have logistics worked out yet. But in January, so I want to give people a chance to get the book and kind of start working through it a little bit. But in January, I am planning to host a virtual live get together. I don't really know what to call it exactly. It will be on Zoom, and anybody who has bought the book, so make sure you hold on to your order information. But for anybody who has bought the book, you don't have to have worked through it, but I'm going to host a Zoom gathering to kind of just talk about the book. You can ask questions. We can maybe go through some of the prompts together. I'm really looking forward to that. Again, I don't have the logistics worked out. I'm not sure how to get people that I don't know who've bought the book to know that this is happening. But I'm really kind of excited about doing that. So know that that will be coming too. So if you're not, I'll share it here on YouTube as well. But if you're not following me on Facebook and you are on Facebook, even if you don't really do much there, make sure you follow me on my Courageous Journeys page. And I would suggest follow versus like. You can do both, but follow, I think you're more likely to get the notification or maybe see what I'm sharing. But I'll be sharing that information, and I will also share it in my newsletter. So if you've not signed up for my newsletter, you can go to my website, courageousjourneys.com, and on the homepage, there's a little section where you can put your name and email, and you'll get newsletters when I send them out. And if you haven't already signed up, you will also get a little kind of guided journal in using affirmations. It's a very brief little PDF journal that I created. So different ways that you can stay connected to me, but definitely do stay connected and share with me your that you've purchased the book. And I hope that I get to connect with you on in January for our live gathering. All right. So I hope so, Michelle. That is my desire. And I really hope that it does, that you find benefit in it. My intention in creating this book wasn't just to write a book. My desire and intention in writing this book was really because of knowing the importance and the power of self-compassion and wanting to be able to reach people, to reach people in a broader way and give them something to help them stay focused and practice on a regular basis to really cultivate that sense of self-compassion. So again, if you pre-order, I would love to hear from you. You could send me an email and let me know. You can send it to healing@courageousjourneys.com because it's just really exciting. And I really want to know who out there might have it. And it should be, if you pre-order, it should be ready to send out next week. I don't really know how all that bookseller stuff happens. None of this is my area of expertise, so I don't know exactly how that happens. But hopefully, you should be getting it. I hope within a week of ordering it, or a week within it being published if you pre-order. Again, if you want a signed copy, I have a link in the description of this video with some information. Unfortunately, shipping internationally is quite expensive and will cost more than the book. But I am happy to do that if that's something that you would like. And you'll find the information on my website to be able to do that. And shipping in the US obviously is a lot less. Shipping in the US will be $6 to ship. But again, if you're in the US, you can find that information on my website, which you can find in the link in the description here. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for being part of this Courageous Journeys family. It's really been great connecting with you. Hello, Lisa. This is something I think a lot of people can relate to. I have a good job, a roof over my head, I'm intelligent, and I have a loving, supportive friends and family. Yet, at the core, you still feel broken and sad. Will this ever go away? It absolutely can go away, and I believe that it will go away when you can really work to truly cultivate and embody self-compassion. And when you truly embody self-compassion and self-acceptance, any moments of judgment, any moments of doubt, any moments of criticism or guilt or shame, they don't grab hold. At least not for any length of time. They don't grab hold in a way that sends you down that spiral. You may feel it. You may have that moment when like, it's there. But when you really cultivated that practice of self-compassion, it becomes more natural for that to be present. And when it's more present, more naturally present, when those feelings come up, the practice of self-compassion pushes them away. And not pushes them away in terms of denial, but it kind of like sends us this burst of light energy and breaks it all apart. That's a better way to describe it. It doesn't push it away. It sends this light of energy, like that Care Bear energy, if you remember that. That light energy, it sends it to all that uncertainty and just breaks it all apart. When I say that that is the power of self-compassion and the journey of Deeply Rooted, that's really what I mean. Like that really is what I believe self-compassion has the power to do. And while I hope that Deeply Rooted helps you do that, it's certainly not the only path. Anything that we can do, any time that we can practice self-compassion, it's going to be beneficial. But we need to be able to practice it regularly, over and over and over and over again. And I know that I say that quite a bit about a lot of things, but that is the reality of any real personal growth and change, and certainly healing. It takes intentional effort and practice to build that new way of being. But again, you don't have to create something totally new. The truth of who you are has always been there. It's just waiting for you to be able to see it. I'm not sure what this means. Add your book to Amazon account. If Costco. From LSA, I'm not sure what that means. Can you maybe share a little bit more of what that means? Because I'm curious what you're referring to there. I don't think that you're being awkward at all. I think most of us have a little bit of a blind spot when it comes to understanding self-compassion, which is why I wrote a book about it. And why I believe that it's something that everybody really can benefit from, because truly, no matter what your history is, we all struggle with self-doubt. We all struggle with self-compassion. Maybe there are some people who can fairly easily practice self-compassion when it comes to some things, but there's some things that they are not able to practice self-compassion around. And that's not uncommon either. Some things, as you put it earlier, some things that might feel a little easier to let yourself off the hook for than other things. But everybody struggles with self-compassion, at least at certain times. So this book is not written specifically for trauma survivors. It's certainly great for trauma survivors, but it's actually written for anybody, male and female, but anybody who struggles with self-doubt. So that's pretty much every human who has the capacity to think in a rational way. That's every human that exists. And really, even children, some of the prompts may not really seem to apply specifically to children because they may not have some specific lived experiences yet. But really, even a teenager, I think, maybe even especially a teenager, like can you imagine if as teenagers, like at 13, if we started this practice of self-compassion? Because at 13, our brains are fairly well developed and we have the capacity for critical thinking, and at least to a certain extent. But we have the capacity to really understand it a bit differently. Can you imagine, even for trauma survivors, if we had had something like this to help us understand that what we believe about who we are is not based in truth, that self-compassion is something that exists, even what it is and how to practice it. I truly believe that we would live in a very different world. If we all had that understanding and learned how to experience self-compassion, we truly would live in a very different world. Because so much of the pain that individuals can cause to other individuals is because of a lack of self-compassion for ourselves. You know, they say wounded people wound people. And I do agree with that, but I think there are some nuanced pieces that are important to that. But one of the things that is, or reasons why that is true, is that when we are disconnected from the truth of ourselves, we live our lives disconnected. We live our lives in a place of self-protecting from feeling all that stuff that we try not to feel. And part of how we self-protect is turning inward and, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of at the expense of others, or we can potentially lash out at others. And self-compassion goes a long way in that. And I think somebody brought that up earlier in this conversation. Selling it in Costco and Amazon. It is on Amazon. So I don't know where you are in the world, but I know that it's available in on Amazon US, Amazon UK, Amazon Canada. I believe any place where there is Amazon, it should be available. I know the book is actually printed in UK, in Australia, and in the US. So your copy will actually come, if you live in those places, your copy will come from those distributors. Whether you buy it from Amazon or whether you buy it from a national retailer. In terms of Costco, that's interesting. I might look into that. I actually don't know. I'm not the one getting these places to carry the book or sell the book. That's happening through the place where I am publishing it through. But Costco is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know how that works, but I am curious about that. Thank you. You're saying Costco, so actually I guess you probably live in the US. That didn't quite register. See, now I could really beat myself up about that. Like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Well, actually, I think they do have Costco. I think I just saw something about Costco in another country somewhere. But anyway, that would be an example where I could kind of beat myself up like, oh, what was I thinking? Of course, it's US. But then, of course, I forgot that there is a Costco in some other country somewhere. But instead of beating myself up because I've practiced self-compassion for so long, I don't have any feelings of feeling bad or stupid or like I screwed up or embarrassed or anything like that, because I didn't think about it and I'm human. Oregon. Yeah. Thank you, Jack. It is a very challenging task much of the time, especially when you're kind of new to practicing self-compassion. Yeah, well, I will check in with my distributor and or printer, I guess they are, Technically, I'm publishing it, so they're the printer and distributor. But I might look into that and see. Kind of curious about that now. Didn't even think about that. So again, thank you all for being here. I will plan to do another live. Let's see, probably in a couple of weeks, maybe on Thursday again. I might pick a different day. I'm not quite sure. Doing it on the same day is a little bit easier for me, generally speaking, but I will plan to do another live in a couple of weeks. So on probably have a topic that we might cover predominantly, but of course, lots of time for Q&A as well. So thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.